China dropped a bombshell on the global economy, imposing steep tariffs on over $75 billion worth of U.S. goods. This aggressive move sent shockwaves through international markets and escalated the ongoing trade war between the world's two largest economies. The tariffs, targeting key American exports like soybeans, automobiles, and electronics, are a direct response to the U.S. own recent tariff hikes. This tit-for-tat exchange has heightened fears of a full-blown trade war, with potentially devastating consequences for the global economy. The impact of China's move was immediate and dramatic. Stock markets around the world plunged as investors reacted with panic and uncertainty. The Dow Jones Industrial Average, a key indicator of U.S. market health, plummeted over 900 points, its worst single-day drop in months. The tech-heavy Nasdaq and the broad S&P 500 also experienced their worst daily performances in recent memory, signaling a widespread loss of confidence in the market. This latest escalation of the trade war has injected a dangerous dose of instability into the global economic system. The tariffs threaten to disrupt intricate supply chains, raise prices for consumers, and dampen business investment. The International Monetary Fund, a global financial watchdog, has warned of the risks these tariffs pose to global growth, urging both sides to find a negotiated solution. The situation remains highly fluid, with each side seemingly entrenched in their positions. The world watches with bated breath, hoping for a de-escalation of this high-stakes economic standoff. The stakes couldn't be higher, as the outcome will have profound and lasting implications for the global economy and the intricate web of international trade that underpins it. Wall Street, the heart of American finance, found itself at the epicenter of the global market earthquake, triggered by China's tariffs. The Dow Jones Industrial Average, a closely watched barometer of U.S. stock market health, went into freefall, shedding over 900 points, a stark reflection of the panic that gripped investors. The Nasdaq Composite, heavily weighted towards technology companies with significant exposure to the Chinese market, suffered its worst day since June 2020, plunging by almost 6%. The S&P 500, representing a broad spectrum of the U.S. economy, wasn't spared either, experiencing its sharpest decline in months, a clear sign that the pain was being felt across all sectors. This sell-off was not confined to U.S. shores, it quickly cascaded across the globe. The Nikkei, Japan's leading stock market index, suffered its most significant weekly drop in 5 years, underscoring the interconnectedness of the global financial system. Investors, fearing a protracted trade war and its potential impact on corporate profits, fled equities, seeking refuge in the perceived safety of gold and U.S. Treasury bonds. This flight to safety drove up the price of gold, a traditional safe haven asset, and pushed down yields on U.S. Treasury bonds, reflecting increased demand. The CBOE Volatility Index, Wall Street's fear gauge, spiked to its highest level in months, highlighting the heightened anxiety gripping investors. The market turmoil served as a stark reminder of the fragility of the global economy and the interconnectedness of financial markets. The tariffs, by injecting uncertainty and disrupting trade flows, have the potential to undermine business confidence, reduce investment, and ultimately stifle economic growth. The situation remains highly fluid, with investors on edge, bracing for further volatility, as the trade war between the world's two largest economies shows no signs of abating. The impact of China's retaliatory tariffs is being acutely felt across a wide swath of American industries, with agriculture, technology, and automobiles emerging as the hardest hit. The agricultural sector, already reeling from low commodity prices and the effects of climate change, is bracing for further pain as China, a major buyer of American agricultural products, has slapped tariffs on soybeans, pork, and other key exports. The technology sector, heavily reliant on global supply chains and the Chinese market for both production and sales, is grappling with the tariffs' ripple effects. Apple, Intel, and other tech giants have seen their stock prices tumble as investors fear the tariffs will eat into their profits and disrupt their operations. The automotive industry is facing a double whammy of tariffs on imported parts and finished vehicles, leading to higher costs for both manufacturers and consumers. The tariffs are already disrupting established supply chains, forcing companies to scramble for alternative sources of materials and components. This disruption is leading to delays, shortages, and higher costs, which are ultimately being passed on to consumers in the form of higher prices. The uncertainty generated by the trade war is also leading to a decline in business investment, as companies postpone expansion plans and delay hiring decisions. Small businesses, often lacking the resources to absorb the shock of tariffs, are particularly vulnerable. The tariffs are squeezing their profit margins, forcing them to raise prices, and making it difficult to compete with foreign companies that are not subject to the same tariffs. The trade war is thus creating a cascade of negative consequences that are rippling through the American economy, threatening jobs, growth, and the livelihoods of millions of Americans. The trade war between the US and China is contributing to rising inflation, as tariffs on imported goods increase costs for businesses and consumers alike. With higher prices for raw materials and finished products, companies are passing these costs on to consumers, leading to an overall increase in the cost of living. The Federal Reserve is closely monitoring the situation, as rising inflation could force them to raise interest rates, potentially slowing economic growth. The ripple effects of the trade war are being felt throughout the economy, with no clear end in sight. The trade conflict has thrown global supply chains into disarray. Companies are scrambling to adapt to new tariffs and regulations. Many are shifting production to other countries to avoid the increased costs. This disruption is affecting everything from consumer electronics to automotive parts. Small businesses are particularly hard hit, struggling to keep up with the rapid changes. As the situation evolves, the long-term impacts on the global economy remain uncertain. As the trade conflict intensifies, the nation finds itself increasingly divided. Families, businesses, and communities are feeling the strain. Some believe the measures are necessary to protect domestic industries, while others argue that the economic fallout is too steep a price to pay. The debate rages on with no clear consensus in sight. The ripple effects of the trade war are being felt far beyond the borders of the United States and China. Global markets are experiencing unprecedented volatility and supply chains are being disrupted. Countries around the world are having to navigate this new, uncertain landscape, adjusting their own policies and strategies in response. Central banks across the globe are on high alert. They are closely monitoring the situation, ready to intervene if necessary to stabilize their economies. Interest rates, currency values, and investment flows are all under scrutiny as financial institutions brace for potential shocks. The United States and China remain at an impasse. Despite numerous rounds of negotiations, no agreement has been reached. Both sides are standing firm, unwilling to make concessions. The world watches and waits, uncertain of what the future holds for these two economic giants and the global economy at large. Well, folks, it finally happened. June 3rd, 2025, a day that will live in infamy, or at least in the annals of really confusing economic policy. President Trump, in his infinite wisdom, declared it Liberation Day. Why? Because nothing says freedom like slapping hefty tariffs on hundreds of foreign goods. The stated goal? You guessed it, the old triple whammy boost American industry, bring back those manufacturing jobs that definitely haven't already been automated, and punish everyone for what Trump perceives as unfair trade practices. Because apparently the best way to promote free trade is with a trade war. Who needs logic when you have tariffs? This wasn't just some off-the-cuff remark during a late-night Twitter bender. This was a full-blown policy announcement with real-world consequences, the likes of which we haven't seen since, well, the last time Trump imposed tariffs. So, who's in the firing line this time? Unsurprisingly, China sits squarely in the crosshairs. Apparently those trade talks didn't go so well. Mexico and Germany are also feeling the heat. These tariffs aren't just targeting some obscure industries either. We're talking major sectors here: automotive, steel, electronics, textiles, agriculture, basically anything that involves, actually making something. It's like someone handed Trump a dartboard of the global economy, and he went full bullseye on the countries we rely on most for, well, pretty much everything. Okay, so what exactly are we talking about here? Buckle up, Buttercup, because these tariffs are about as subtle as a brick to the face. We're talking rates as high as 50% on some goods. That's right, 50%. Remember those beautiful, clean coal jobs Trump promised? Well, get ready to pay 50% more for those Chinese-made solar panels because those coal jobs aren't coming back, folks. And don't even think about buying a foreign car. There's a 25% tariff on those bad boys, effective immediately. But wait, there's more. The The existing 25% tariffs on steel and aluminum, still there. And if you thought those were bad, just wait until you see what they're cooking up for pharmaceuticals, lumber, copper, and semiconductor chips. Hint, it involves more tariffs. Now, you might be thinking, John, surely the markets reacted well to this bold display of economic prowess. Oh, bless your heart. The markets reacted the way a chihuahua reacts to a thunderstorm, with a whole lot of shaking and probably some unfortunate accidents. The Dow Jones took a nosedive faster than a lead balloon, plummeting 2.5%. The S&P 500 and Nasdaq weren't far behind, dropping 3% and 3.3% respectively. We're talking trillions of dollars in losses, the worst single-day drop since the COVID-19 pandemic. Meanwhile, economists are running around like their hair's on fire, warning of a potential global recession, skyrocketing inflation, and a whole host of other economic calamities. They're predicting that this little Liberation Day celebration could end up costing each American household an extra $5,000 per year. That's right, folks. Freedom isn't free. It costs $5,000, apparently. As you can imagine, the reaction to Trump's Liberation Day announcement has been about as unified as a pack of cats trying to herd goldfish. Supporters are cheering him on, praising his bold leadership and claiming that this is exactly what America needs to fight back against those dastardly foreigners. Meanwhile, critics are busy pointing out that starting a trade war is perhaps not the most strategic move in the history of economic policy. They're concerned about rising prices, global isolation, and the fact that we seem to be systematically dismantling our relationships with our closest allies. It's a tale as old as time. Trump does something outrageous. People either love it or hate it, and everyone argues about it on Twitter. The circle of life, folks. Section 6. The business of tariffs, domestic concerns. Now, while the politicians and pundits are busy having their usual shouting matches, let's see what the actual business community thinks about all this. Spoiler alert, they're not thrilled. The Chamber of Commerce, usually about as exciting as a beige wall, came out swinging against the tariffs, expressing concern about the impact on consumers and small businesses. And those U.S. manufacturers that Trump claims to be protecting, they're worried about rising production costs, potential job cuts, and delays caused by supply chain disruptions. Remember those manufacturing jobs Trump promised to bring back? Yeah, those might be the first ones to go. And then there are the farmers, who are already reeling from the effects of the previous trade war with China. They're worried about losing even more export markets, which could be devastating for their livelihoods. But hey, at least those steelworkers will be happy, right? Except, wait a minute, they're not happy either, because the tariffs are driving up the cost of steel, making it more expensive for them to do business. It's almost like this whole tariff thing is just a giant mess that benefits no one. Section 7. Echoes of discontent, the world responds. The rest of the world, meanwhile, is watching this whole Liberation Day spectacle with a mixture of amusement and horror. China, never one to back down from a trade war, has already vowed retaliation, because as we all know, nothing says, let's be friends, like slapping tariffs on each other's goods. The European Union, led by the always composed Ursula von der Leyen, called the tariffs a major blow and hinted at countermeasures. Japan's prime minister warned of a great impact on US-Japan relations and the global economy. And Australia's prime minister, well, he's still trying to figure out how to get Trump on the phone to ask him what the hell he's thinking. Even Canada and Mexico, our supposed allies in the glorious USMCA trade agreement, are feeling the heat. They might be exempt from reciprocal tariffs, but they're still facing tariffs on goods and energy. It's like being told you're exempt from the family vacation but then being forced to stay in the car the whole time. Section 8. The White House doubles down. Of course, the White House, in its infinite wisdom, remains unfazed by all this global backlash. They're framing the tariffs as a patriotic act of defiance, claiming that any short-term pain will be outweighed by the long-term gains. They're essentially asking us to trust them on this, which, given their track record, is a bit like trusting a fox to guard the henhouse. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, in a truly baffling analogy, described the tariffs as a shrinking ice cube, suggesting that they would initially raise revenue but eventually lead to more domestic production. He also urged other countries not to retaliate because apparently, starting a trade war and then asking everyone to play nice is a perfectly reasonable diplomatic strategy. So, there you have it, folks. The Trump administration, in its infinite wisdom, has decided to play economic chicken with the rest of the world. What could possibly go wrong? Section 9. A future etched in uncertainty. As we stand on the precipice of this brave new world of tariffs and trade wars, one thing is certain: the future is about as clear as a muddy puddle. Will these tariffs achieve their stated goal of boosting American industry and bringing back jobs? Or will they simply lead to higher prices for consumers, retaliation from other countries, and a global economic slowdown? Only time will tell. But one thing is for sure, it's going to be a bumpy ride. So buckle up, folks, and hold on tight. We're in for a wild one. The sky turned an ominous green. The air grew thick and still. A low rumble, like a freight train approaching, sent chills down spines. In an instant, the peace of a warm spring day was shattered. A monstrous tornado outbreak tore through the heartland of America, leaving a trail of destruction and despair in its wake. The sirens wailed, a haunting symphony against the backdrop of howling winds. From Texas to Tennessee, communities braced for impact. The storm system, a volatile mix of warm Gulf air and cold fronts, had spawned a deadly dance of twisters. Fear gripped the hearts of millions as the sky unleashed its fury. The first touchdowns were swift and brutal. Homes were reduced to rubble. Businesses were ripped apart. Vehicles became mangled heaps of metal. The storm raged, an unforgiving force of nature, leaving behind a scene of utter devastation. As the dust settled, the true extent of the disaster began to emerge. The communities lay wounded, scarred by the storm's wrath. But amidst the wreckage, stories of courage, resilience, and compassion began to emerge. Norman, Oklahoma, Wichita Falls, Texas, Potosi, Missouri, these towns and countless others became synonymous with the unrelenting power of the March/April 2025 tornado outbreak. The storm system, one of the deadliest in recent memory, carved a path of destruction across the heartland. In Norman, an EF4 tornado, packing winds exceeding 200 miles per hour, ripped through the heart of the city. Homes were leveled, businesses were reduced to rubble, and the landscape was forever altered. The stories of survival were nothing short of miraculous. Wichita Falls bore the brunt of a relentless EF3 tornado. The city's historic downtown area was hit hard, with buildings dating back to the early 20th century reduced to piles of brick and mortar. The human toll was devastating, with multiple fatalities reported and countless injured. The small town of Potosi, Missouri, was virtually wiped off the map by an EF3 tornado. The storm's intensity left residents with little time to react. The aftermath was a scene of utter devastation, with homes reduced to their foundations and debris scattered for miles. Even as the storm raged, stories of courage and compassion began to surface. First responders, many of whom had lost their own homes, worked tirelessly to pull survivors from the wreckage. Neighbors helped neighbors, sharing what little food, water, and shelter they had left. The National Guard was deployed to the hardest-hit areas, providing much-needed support and security. Medical teams from across the country arrived to offer assistance to overwhelmed local hospitals. The spirit of unity and selflessness was evident in every corner of the disaster zone. One particularly moving story involved a group of college students in Norman, Oklahoma. They had taken shelter in a storm cellar as the tornado roared overhead. When the storm passed, they emerged to find their neighborhood in ruins. Without hesitation, they began checking on their neighbors, pulling them from debris, and administering first aid. Their quick thinking and bravery undoubtedly saved lives. Amidst the devastation, the voices of survivors painted a poignant picture of resilience and loss. Jonathan Gerke, a resident of Pilot Grove, Missouri, recounted the terrifying moment an EF2 tornado ripped through his property. It sounded like a jet engine, and then everything went black. Gerke and his family survived by taking shelter in their basement. In Ballard County, Kentucky, a family huddled together in their bathtub as a tornado tore through their home. They emerged, miraculously unharmed, to find their house reduced to rubble. The father, his voice choked with emotion, shared, "We lost everything, but we have each other, and that's all that matters." Tragically, not all stories have happy endings. The tornado outbreak claimed the lives of at least 7 people, leaving behind grieving families and communities grappling with unimaginable loss. In Hendricks County, Indiana, a man was killed by downed power lines, a stark reminder of the hidden dangers that linger even after the storm has passed. Section 5, Nature's Fury Explained, The Perfect Storm Brews. The devastating tornado outbreak was a stark reminder of the awesome power of nature. Meteorologists pointed to a rare confluence of atmospheric conditions that fueled the storms. A potent mix of warm, moist air surging north from the Gulf of Mexico collided with a cold, dry air mass pushing in from the Rockies. This clash of air masses created an unstable atmosphere, ripe for the formation of supercells, the breeding ground for tornadoes. As the warm air rose rapidly, it collided with the colder air aloft, causing the air to rotate. These rotating columns of air, known as mesocyclones, can spawn tornadoes when they descend to the ground. The tornadoes that ripped through the heartland were particularly intense and long-lived. Some stayed on the ground for miles, carving paths of destruction that spanned entire counties. The storms were also erratic, changing direction and intensity with little warning. Section 6. Answering the call, first responders and the relief effort. In the immediate aftermath of the tornado outbreak, a massive relief effort swung into action. First responders, many of whom had worked tirelessly through the night, were joined by volunteers from across the country. Together, they formed a lifeline for communities reeling from the disaster. The American Red Cross established shelters for those who had lost their homes, providing food, water, and a safe place to sleep. Medical teams worked around the clock to treat the injured, while mental health professionals offered counseling to those struggling to cope with the trauma. The response from the federal government was swift. President Biden declared a state of emergency for the affected states, freeing up federal funds and resources to aid in the recovery effort. The Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, deployed teams to assess the damage and provide assistance to those in need. Section 7. Picking up the pieces, a long road to recovery. As the initial shock of the disaster began to fade, communities across the heartland faced the daunting task of rebuilding. The road to recovery would be long and arduous, but the spirit of resilience was evident everywhere. The destruction of homes and businesses left many without basic necessities. The loss of power and water disrupted daily life. Schools were closed indefinitely, and many were left wondering when or if they would be able to return to work. The economic impact of the tornado outbreak was significant. Insurance companies braced for billions of dollars in claims, while businesses struggled to reopen their doors. The agricultural sector was hit particularly hard, with crops destroyed and livestock lost. Section 8. The indomitable spirit, resilience in the face of adversity. Despite the unimaginable loss and devastation, the human spirit shone through. Communities rallied together, offering support and encouragement to one another. The stories of resilience were as inspiring as they were heartbreaking. In Selmer, Tennessee, where an EF3 tornado had ripped through the town, residents gathered for a community cookout, sharing stories and offering comfort to one another. A local pastor, his voice filled with emotion, remarked, "We may have lost our buildings, but we haven't lost our spirit. We will rebuild stronger than ever before." In Lake City, Arkansas, another community devastated by an EF3 tornado, volunteers from neighboring towns flocked to help with the cleanup effort. A sense of community, of shared purpose, began to emerge from the wreckage. Section 9. From the ashes, we rise, a brighter tomorrow. The March and April 2025 tornado outbreak was a stark reminder of the destructive power of nature and the fragility of life. But it was also a testament to the indomitable spirit of the human heart. From the ashes of destruction, a renewed sense of hope and determination began to emerge. The road to recovery would be long, but the communities impacted by the storms were determined to rebuild. With the support of each other, their country, and the world, they would rise from the rubble, stronger and more resilient than ever before. The scars of the storm might remain, but so too would the spirit of courage, compassion, and hope that had carried them through their darkest. The first week of April 2025 will be remembered not for the promise of spring, but for the fury of nature unleashed. A monstrous storm system, fueled by a volatile mix of warm, moist air and frigid northern winds, tore across the American South and Midwest, leaving a trail of devastation in its wake. What began as a typical spring storm system quickly morphed into something more sinister. Meteorologists watched in disbelief as radar screens lit up with the telltale signs of severe weather, swirling red and orange masses representing torrential rain, hail, and the unmistakable signature of tornadoes. This was not a localized event. This was a storm of extraordinary scope, impacting millions across multiple states. Its reach was vast, stretching from the plains of Texas to the hills of West Virginia. The storm's impact was immediate and terrifying. The sky turned an ominous green as winds howled like freight trains. Then, the tornadoes touched down. The storm struck with brutal swiftness, leaving little time for preparation. Homes were reduced to rubble in the blink of an eye. Cars were tossed aside like toys, the air filled with the roar of wind and the deafening crash of collapsing structures. For those in the storm's path, it was a fight for survival. The aftermath of the storm revealed a landscape scarred by nature's raw power. The storms carved a path of destruction that stretched for miles. The official death toll, a grim metric of the storm's power, climbed steadily as rescuers searched amidst the debris. Each life lost represented a family shattered, a future cut short. Entire communities were unrecognizable. Homes were reduced to splintered wood and twisted metal. Businesses were flattened. Familiar landmarks, once sources of civic pride, were now piles of rubble. The storm's toll went beyond the immediate loss of life and property. The economic impact was staggering. Farms, the lifeblood of many rural communities, were devastated, crops destroyed and livestock lost. The cost of rebuilding, both in terms of dollars and manpower, promised to be monumental. The storm served as a stark reminder of the destructive force of nature and the vulnerability of even the most carefully built structures. Even as the storm raged, heroes emerged. First responders, embodying courage and selflessness, rushed towards the danger zones. These brave men and women, many of whom had worked through the night, tirelessly searched for survivors, their determination fueled by the faintest cries for help. They were the first beacons of hope in a landscape of despair. Firefighters, paramedics, and police officers worked tirelessly, their efforts often hampered by downed power lines, flooded roads, and treacherous debris. They faced down danger at every turn, their commitment to saving lives unwavering. Stories of their heroism began to emerge, offering glimmers of light amidst the devastation. A team of firefighters in Jonesboro, Arkansas, formed a human chain to rescue a family trapped on the roof of their collapsing home as the floodwaters rose around them. In rural Kentucky, a paramedic used his own boat to reach stranded residents after bridges were washed away, providing medical aid and comfort until help could arrive. These acts of bravery, often performed at great personal risk, served as a powerful testament to the human spirit. The storms left more than just physical damage. They plunged entire communities into darkness. The electrical grid, already strained by the demands of modern life, buckled under the onslaught. Downed power lines and damaged substations left hundreds of thousands without electricity. The lack of power had a cascading effect, crippling communication systems, disrupting water treatment plants, and shutting down hospitals. The hum of appliances, a constant in modern life, was replaced by an unsettling silence. Refrigerators warmed, food spoiled, and homes grew cold as temperatures plummeted in the storm's wake. For those who relied on electrically powered medical equipment, the power outages posed a direct threat to their health. Repair crews working around the clock in challenging conditions faced a daunting task. Restoring power to affected communities became a race against time. The outages underscored the fragility of modern infrastructure and the ripple effects of its disruption. It was a stark reminder of how much we depend on the interconnected systems that power our lives. In the face of such widespread devastation, the best of humanity shone through. A spirit of generosity and resilience took hold as neighbors helped neighbors. Stories of selflessness and compassion emerged from the wreckage. Communities, though battered and bruised, found strength in unity. People opened their homes to those who had lost everything. Makeshift shelters, hastily organized in schools, churches, and community centers, became beacons of refuge. Volunteers, many of whom had also suffered losses, worked tirelessly, distributing food, water, and clothing to those in need. The outpouring of support extended beyond the immediate disaster zone. Donations poured in from across the country and around the world. Organizations like the Red Cross and the Salvation Army mobilized resources, dispatching volunteers and supplies to the hardest-hit areas. The storm revealed the interconnectedness of communities, demonstrating that even in the darkest of times, compassion and solidarity can prevail. Section 6. A call to action. As the immediate crisis subsided, the long and arduous task of rebuilding began. Governors in the affected states issued disaster declarations, unlocking federal aid, and deploying the National Guard to assist with relief efforts. The Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, mobilized teams to assess the damage and coordinate the distribution of resources. The storm's devastation served as a stark reminder of the importance of disaster preparedness and the need for resilient infrastructure. Calls for improved early warning systems, stronger building codes, and updated evacuation plans echoed from town halls to the halls of Congress. The disaster also reignited the debate about climate change and its role in intensifying extreme weather events. Scientists pointed to the storm as a harbinger of things to come, a stark illustration of the growing risks posed by a warming planet. The recovery process, though daunting, presented an opportunity to rebuild smarter and stronger, with an eye towards mitigating the risks of future disasters. Section 7. Stories of Survival. Amidst the wreckage, stories of survival and resilience offered glimmers of hope. In the small town of Mayfield, Kentucky, A young couple, Sarah and Michael, huddled in their basement as a tornado ripped through their neighborhood. They emerged to find their home reduced to rubble, but they were alive, their bond strengthened by their shared ordeal. In Jackson, Tennessee, 72-year-old Margaret Johnson, trapped in her attic as floodwaters rose, was rescued by a neighbor who heard her cries for help. She lost everything in the flood, but she considered herself lucky to be alive, her spirit unbroken. These stories, replicated 1,000 times over, underscored the resilience of the human spirit. They served as powerful reminders that even in the face of unimaginable loss, hope and the will to rebuild can endure. Section 8. Rebuilding from the Rubble. The road to recovery promised to be long and arduous, a testament to the storm's destructive power. The initial shock gave way to the daunting reality of rebuilding shattered lives and communities. The task seemed overwhelming, a landscape of debris stretching as far as the eye could see, but the human spirit, as it so often does, rose to the challenge. With each passing day, progress was made. The whine of chainsaws replaced the eerie silence as crews cleared fallen trees and debris. The rumble of construction equipment signaled the start of rebuilding. Volunteers, their numbers swelled by a steady stream of newcomers, continued to provide essential aid and support. The rebuilding process went beyond bricks and mortar. It was about mending the social fabric of communities, restoring a sense of normalcy, and providing support for those struggling with trauma and loss. It was a marathon, not a sprint, requiring patience, perseverance, and a shared commitment to recovery. Section 9. Facing a new reality. The storms of April 2025 served as a stark wake-up call, a reminder of the awesome power of nature and the vulnerability of human communities. But they also highlighted the importance of preparedness, the strength of community, and the enduring capacity of the human spirit to overcome adversity. As the affected communities rebuilt, they did so with a newfound awareness of the risks they faced. The storms had exposed the fragility of infrastructure, the limitations of emergency response systems, and the urgency of addressing the root causes of climate change. The recovery process presented an opportunity not just to rebuild what was lost, but to build back better, to create communities that were more resilient, more sustainable, and better prepared for the challenges of a changing world. The storms had left an indelible mark, but they had also ignited a spark of determination, a resolve to learn from the past and build a safer, more resilient future.